everyone. Thank you so much for tuning into today's Author Talk series brought to you by the Library Speakers Consortium. The Library Speakers Consortium is a partnership of more than 500 library systems across the US, Canada, and New Zealand with the goal of making Author Talks more accessible to communities of all sizes. I am Brandon Adler, your host and moderator, in conversation with each of the acclaimed authors and presenters that you will hear from throughout our series. Today, we have a special treat. We're so honored to have Vice President and Literary Agent Seth Fishman with us to give us an inside look at working with a literary agent. Hi, Seth.
Hi. I hope everyone's having a great day.
Oh, it's about to get better, I'm sure. Before we jump in, I want to give everybody that standard housekeeping information that keeps everything running smoothly, and then I'll turn things over to Seth. We have compiled some questions that were pre-submitted with registration, so thank you for doing that. But you also can continue to submit questions for the entirety of the presentation. You do so by clicking that questions button that's just below this live stream video. If you're already in full screen mode, you might need to hit escape so that you can see the tabs beneath the video. There are quite a few of you tuning in today, and we will take as many questions as we can during the Q&A period. And I do want to note that this presentation today is a little longer than typical. Seth will talk for about an hour, and then we'll finish up with around 20 to 30 minutes of Q&A. So it's a little longer than usual. As a reminder, there will be a link to the recording sent out to all registrants in about 24 hours. So if you have to leave early for any reason whatsoever, don't worry about that. Now, to formally introduce our guest for today, head of the Los Angeles office, Seth is a vice president and agent at the Gernert Company, which he joined in 2010 after beginning his career as an agent at Sterling Lord Literaristic, Inc. Born in Midland, Texas, he graduated from Princeton University and earned an MFA in creative writing from the University of East Anglia in Norwich, England. His interests are wide-ranging, but in particular, he's looking for the new voice, the original idea, the entirely breathtaking creative angle in both fiction and nonfiction. He lives in Los Angeles with his wife and children and is the author of the award-winning picture book, which is a favorite over here, 100 Billion Trillion Stars, along with Power Up and The Ocean in Your Bathtub, as well as 2 YA books. Thank you so much for being here, Seth. I am going to turn things over to you now.
Thanks, Brandon. That was a very kind intro, and thanks to the Library Speakers Consortium. I mean, this is incredible to have the opportunity to be able to connect to so many people at the same time, and I love this chance, and I love that all of y'all are here interacting with your local communities on sort of this global scale. So thank you so much for having me. I've been told that I've been given a full hour to babble, and I got to say there's so much that we could be talking about. So what I intend to do is speak as much as I can about demystifying an agent and why you need one, and sort of the whole process from you have a book written to you're finding an agent, to how do you get an agent, to what do you do after that point, and a little bit into publishing as well. I probably could do the whole thing on one topic, and so you'll find me moving maybe a little fast, hopefully not too scattered. I also am known for going on these different side tangents, so also apologies there, but I think the side tangents tend to be the thing that people seem to like the most sometimes. A little bit more about me that I think is contextually helpful is I've wanted, I had those picture books was shown. I wanted to be a writer ever since I was a kid. I'm sure like a lot of y'all, and I grew up into the space of writing short stories and trying to submit, back when you sent print things and, printed off copies of stuff. And I went to an MFA program with an idea of, spending some time and writing the book that I wanted to write, and sort of worked on my craft, but wrote a book that was not the right book for me or for the market. And I think that it's important to share that I have, I think, 4 adult books that are in drawers that never sold. And Brandon did a great introduction, but I actually have now a number of other books that have been published in the picture book space. So I have 7 now. But it's been like a crazy process to have a picture books published when I went to grad school and dreamed of writing this, the adult novel, which is a different sort of thing. So I love that I can bring that to the table here, because my goal is to speak about, across different genres. In fact, I think that's salient a little bit more about me as well, is I represent a lot of different stuff. The one thing I'll say is, and I guess I should probably change that on my bio as well, is that I have sort of come to the conclusion that while I do some popular science nonfiction, most of the time I'm not like the nonfiction agent. I don't do memoirs, really, not much of them, and I don't do much nonfiction, but I'm happy to speak towards it, and I can sort of advise a decent amount about it, but it's not my bread and butter. But yeah, so I wanted to share the kind of books that I represent, so that you can get a sense of that. I can brag about my clients a bit, but also give a sense of sort of the range, and what we can do with that. And then we'll go from there. So here's just a quick little, show of some things I have. I represent Liz Moore of The God of the Woods, which is doing great. Where's the angle? I can do better. There we go. And Long Bright River, Long Bright River is going to be a TV show really soon. And this is literary fiction. There's like The Tiger's Wife, which is the first book I ever sold. It did really well. And this is her most recent tale, which is incredible and amazing. And that's literary fiction. And now, into a totally different genre, is like webcomics. Webcomics are, or online sort of geniuses, creators, artists. So I don't know if you know Anna Bond of Rifle Paper Company. So this is like, redesign of covers for Pride and Prejudice. We have YA graphic novels. This is on the bestseller list right now, from Cassandra Kalin, New Girl. And then we have other things like Sarah Anderson's Fangs. We have Strange Planet by Nathan Pyle, which is a TV show on Apple right now, and is a really amazing webcomic. And then we have some webcomics that are science-based. They end up, Zach Weinersmith has that, and worked with his wife, Dr. Kelly Weinersmith, to make a nonfiction book called City on Mars. So that's just sort of the nonfiction I like to do. Here's another one, is I represent Kate Beaton. This is a show on Apple too. You should watch it for your kids. It's incredible. It's called Pinecone and Pony there. But she writes a memoir that's like one of the most important books I've ever worked on, about the oil sands, being a woman in the oil sands in Canada. So one of the things why I bring this up is because sometimes a client, and sometimes you guys, want to write more than just the one thing. Like your first thing is going to be a novel, but maybe you want to write a kid's book. Maybe you want to write a picture book, a middle grade book. Maybe you're an artist and you head in a certain different direction. You have an important nonfiction book you want to write. So one thing, and we'll speak about this more, is that if you want to write more than that, it's okay. If you just want to be a short story writer, that's fine too. But if you want to write more than that, sometimes it is important to work with an agent who's going to be able to sort of handle that load, or at least the agency be able to handle your future as well. You're betting on your future. A YouTube channel, creator, bestseller. This is one of the bigger books I'd represent. What If is from XKCD, which is a webcomic. And, like even some, wonderful photographers writing memoir stories. And then finally, the other stuff I do is sort of sci-fi and fantasy. We have Becky Chambers right here, which I'm sure a lot of you know of. Recent wonderful phenomenon is Dungeon Crawler Carl. This is from an indie creator who we got deals in print publishing. So I could talk a lot about that sort of separately, which I really care about. Hit the bestseller list just this year, Blood Over Brighthaven by M.L. Wong, The Mountain and the Sea. Here's some Hugo winners that are amazing. Mary Robin Kowal, science-based, like really heavy science-based modern. There's Ancillary Justice. And finally, you've seen this on Netflix, probably, The Three-Body Problem. So again, I lay those out to say all those authors have different needs, different things that they've done afterwards, different styles. And I think one of the tricky things that you learn as an agent over time is that I think a lot of times people ask why you need an agent, and it's just about the deal or making the deal. And a deal is really important, but what's really important about having an agent is to have this person be your advocate for what kind of book you're writing, the what is in between the covers, right? The actual pages help you edit it and grow the book, and then also grow your future. Sorry. One of the things that's really, really important for you guys to realize And I'm sorry, I can see that I have my ring light on and it's shining in my glasses, so apologies there. Is that as a writer, you are a business. You are your own business. In fact, after you sell some books and you bring in enough money, we always recommend to our clients that they literally start an S corp. I have one myself called Seth Fishman Inc. You don't need to go do that yet unless you're having money coming in, but you are your own business. And so sometimes you're thinking about your stuff as you're writing, and that's the most important thing. Let's get the book in good shape, and that's really the key to all of this. But when you think about the relationship between an agent, it's important to recognize that you're hiring us. And I am not naive enough to believe that the power dynamic doesn't start with the agent being the coveted thing. Like, you want an agent, you want a big agent, you want, I remember this feeling myself. You want to, sort of do whatever you can to get that agent. But the dynamic should be, or ultimately is, like, one that you shouldn't be afraid to step into a relationship, which is incredibly important, and act like you're hiring someone, which means you need to interview them. You need to ask them questions. You need to get a good feel for them. You need to get a good vibe for them. A lot of people think that their editor is going to be their most important relationship, but it's definitely the agent. For practical reasons, editors tend to get promotions by moving to other companies, and they leave their books behind. So oftentimes books get abandoned, which is awful. And so part of my job is to find editors that are like pretty happy where they're at, and try to avoid those surprises. But an agent, if they move, like when I went from Sterling Lord to Gernert, it was up to the clients, but they all came with me. No one didn't come with me. You can go in that other direction. So you can stick with your agent all the way through. My kid's godmother, Taya, is, that's my client. So, these relationships can really grow throughout the process. Though, don't expect to be your agent's kid's godparent, like when you sign with them. Okay, so at this point in time, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start up a slideshow, and it's going to take the whole screen. So I'm going to be sort of focused on that, and we'll just sort of talk our way through the whole process of getting a book. So let me pop up the slideshow for me, and I'm ready for it. And Brandon, are we there yet online so everyone can see it? I'm not hearing anyone, so I just want to make sure.
Yeah, you're good to go, Seth.
Okay, good. Sorry, I just want to make sure. Okay, so this is the title page. Doesn't really matter too much. Let's move on. One thing you're not looking for in a literary agent is PowerPoint slide proficiency. So get ready for this to be by far the best PowerPoint presentation you've ever seen. I think it's important to take a hot second to actually note. Well, if it is nice to have an agency make your stuff look good. So you always want them to have things look good and professional. That includes your query letters and whatnot. But this just isn't my forte. So onwards. Okay, so we're going to start at the place where you've written a book. A question that a lot of people ask is, what do we do? Not only what do we do now, but how do we know we're sort of done with that process? And this is a question I get all the time. So it doesn't matter what book it is. I will acknowledge that in nonfiction, you're submitting a proposal, and we can speak a bit about that. But even still, if you think of the proposal as book in this scenario, what you really need to do is make sure there's no major edits on your side and the manuscript is clean. So there will always be errors in, I'm sure y'all have discovered an error in a book published, by a big 5 publisher. Errors happen. So you don't need to get too hung up on the small and occasional error. But what should happen is that you should read the manuscript, or someone should be able to read a manuscript and have it be relatively clean, especially the first few pages. I mean, there shouldn't be misspellings there. You really want to make sure you start on that strong foot, and that there's no major edits. And what do I mean by that is there you might be in a place where you're like, oh, you know what, you need some help with a certain section. You feel like it could be maybe different, and that's okay. If you need to go to someone else to get that help, it would be great if if you knew there was an error or a problem, you got a beta reader, which means a reader before the agent, to look at it. And we'll talk about that in a second. But generally what I mean is you're not thinking, oh, I know I could do this part better, but I'm sort of tired of writing this, or, oh, I need the help of someone else with it. It's okay to need help. A book gets edited many times, but you need to bring it as far as you can bring it. At the same time, when you bring it to an agent's going to edit it 1 or 2 times with you. An editor will edit it with you 1 to 3 times. A copy editor will edit it. So things get edited. They get much cleaner, but you still want to bring it to a place where there's no like major overt errors. And the other thing is that, you have your beta readers who are not your parents, who are not people who are yes people. You need to find someone who will really be honest with you. And I think this goes back to that drawer book stuff I was talking about. You need to be okay. And this is tricky because it's hard to get an agent and it's hard to get a book deal. And there's a lot of rejections, and we'll talk about rejections in a bit too. So there is this fine line of when you know a book's not working or not. But sometimes a book is not working, and if you're just getting a consistent run of this isn't right, or you can't find a way around a problem, then it's okay to put something in the drawer. You can come back to it later and start with something else, and that's okay. I know it's hard. I know we have jobs, but everyone will have books in drawers, and it's basically like any sport or anything. You need to be practicing to be getting better. So when it's ready and your beta readers, it's also important, it's helpful. I think one of the most successful and helpful things that you could be doing is finding a community of people. Depends on what category you're in, but but like for kids, there's a lot of community around that are local groups. You can find that at libraries, which we're at right now. You can find it online. Finding groups is a helpful thing to find these beta readers who are not your parents. A lot of a question about why you need an agent. This comes up in some ways because a lot of times someone might get a deal in hand and still be like, well, I don't need to give it to an agent. Why do I need that? There's a lot of stuff that we do. And I just really can't stress enough that why you will need an agent. And I'm going to go over this stuff here. But one thing that's really important is that when you think about the value of an agent, and people talk about the nitty gritty of that. So an agent, we take 15% of your domestic deals, and 20% of your any foreign rights deals. And that 20% is because we pay people on the ground abroad as well. So it's sort of split between that person as well. That seems like a pretty big chunk. But I can say that if you got an offer in from a publisher and you brought that over to us, just there in the contract negotiation and the advanced negotiation, we'd hit that 15%. But that's focusing on just the deal. What's really important is that an agent is able to guide you through every step of the way, from the intonation of an editor's voice to finding the good editor who's going to be right for you, for helping you create a whirlwind around the book in-house at a publishing house to get them excited, to protecting you if you hate the cover of the book that's promoted to you, and what you can do there. So why do you need an agent? Editorial. I think a lot of the different agents act in different ways there, and authors have different interests. But the number one thing that we do the first thing I say that we do is we read and edit a book, and it's especially once you get to book 2 and onwards. When you send book 1, it's spent hopefully through all these other things we talked about, and we will still edit the book. But once you get further on, you're going to have the first line of defense is usually your agent. And you don't need your agent to be as good as an editor. a lot of them are, but you can have an editor for that reason. But an agent will still help you throughout the process in many different ways. So I help people come up with ideas if that's what they want, help them point them in the right direction. Certain authors you get to trust where they can get to on their own, and other ones you really need to get in there and crack things and turn them around. Editorial is extremely important in this process so that you can put your best foot forward. I like to say the more the merrier. People wonder sometimes if they can sell a book on proposal. Maybe you can, but if you do that, you're going to sell it for less because it's less of a finished product. So part of our job is to create a finished product for you or help you get to that point. And again, different agents do differently. So if you're looking for an agent, when you have conversations with them, you're going to want to ask about their editorial, how they handle that. I do specifically bigger picture stuff, and I'm less of a line edit. If I see a mistyped word, I'll note it, but it's less important to me because I've mistyping things happen all the time. But I do care about having the book be as good as it can be, So then we have institutional knowledge. This is really important in terms of, I've been doing this for 20 years. So I have my agency that I've been at, which can give me the support of, you're not just at an agent. You're not just have one agent, you have the agency behind you. So if I have an issue, I go to my colleagues. So we have a larger knowledge about how to approach something and how to deal with situations. But then you just have a lot of information that I have about the market, about what's working, about who to send to, about what the trends are, about whether we care about trends. Then, you need agents to sell the translation rights. The ancillary rights is really the word for 3 through 5 ancillary rights, is the things that are outside the book stuff that you might not think about. So you can sell the foreign rights, the translation rights to a publisher, but in general, it's better to keep them because then we make individual deals abroad. It often means both more money and also more control over your material, which is really wonderful. Film and TV. A lot of times we pair up with a co-agent, which is another, like a Hollywood agent, say, but that 15% that I mentioned doesn't go up. We sort of split it with them. And that person, we make our own contacts. We pitch those people. They take on a book if they love it, and then they try and sell it for film and TV. A lot of the stuff you see online where authors that you love say that they have that like something's coming to film, actually get a little frustrated because most of the time that's not true. Most of the time it means that those things are optioned, which means a place basically buys the right for usually 18 months, and then they can renew it for another 18 and maybe more down the line. They will buy the right to try to make something happen, but nothing, most things in Hollywood don't get made. So a lot of times people share that their stuff is optioned and they sort of phrase it like it's getting made. So that's a lot down the line there. That's already complicated, right? So you need to have someone to help you take care of that. Merchandise. A lot of people's books aren't great for merchandise, but some people's really are. Kids stuff, sci-fi, fantasy, illustrated projects. You need an agent if you are doing books that need illustrators, especially kids books. There's a lot of agencies that are basically illustrator agencies, or they have a stable of illustrators who they help pair with authors. I like to work with a lot of author illustrators together because it's just a lot easier. I mean, as in like it's one person is that. That's easier, and it lets you get away with stuff. Like think about where the wild things are and how there's those 3 pages where there's the wild rumpus and there's no text. I don't think that an author could just write, and now 3 pages of no text and you just write a wild rumpus. They probably wouldn't do that. But if you're an author illustrator, you can have like a little bit more play. But an agent can help you find an illustrator if that's appropriate. And sometimes those illustrators are not just pretty art, but like they're really value add. They bring their own audience. Obviously contracts, you should be, checking in with how an agency handles that once you get further down the line, if you're going to sign with a place. But we have, say, an in-house, we have our own sort of legal team that we work with, that we have our own boilerplate negotiations. Boilerplate means that like we've already negotiated with all these publishers, like a base level. And then there's certain things we argue about every time. And we'll help you with your contracts, which is a huge deal. You're not supposed to know these things. Finally, connections. Well, not finally. I'm only on 8. I'm going through them, and you can read them right here. I know, but I think the idea is to sort of expand a little bit so you can get a sense of the scope of. It's not how daunting. It's just sort of what are the things that can make a business work the best, right? So for connections, some of that is finding the right editors for your project. I think that's a large part of it, but it goes way beyond that. Like I have connections with Amazon for the best of lists. We have connections at Barnes and Noble. I have connections with reviewers and influencers, and we can help push things for your book beyond just what we do with an editor. Because in my take on it, a lot of times selling a book is sort of like you give it to a publisher and then off they go. So once that happens, then our job is to get the publisher, make the job as easy as possible. Almost assume that the publisher will do nothing, even though that's, of course, not true, though it happens a lot of times too. Sometimes to their fault, sometimes not. And my job is to help things succeed, hopefully, or at least get set up for the next level, in spite of any negative things that happen. I consider a book a success if I can sell the next book for more money, right? Like that's what I want. Even if it's very little, I want an upward trend. So I like to try and help make that happen. That's what we're talking about with planning. I never tell an author what to write, but if an author of mine wants to work on their next project, they'll send me, I'll ask them to send 3 to 5 ideas, and then that they are equally excited about, and then I'll say where they land in the market. Backlist, what that means is books that you've already published. So say you're on book 5, or say you have books that you self-published, you come in with an agent, and we sort of help continue to take care of that, both abroad and with those ancillary rights, and sometimes with continuing to have things happen at a publisher. Like I showed you Liz Moore's God of the Woods. Well, her first 2 books are incredible. Heft and Unseen World were published by Norton, which is a different publisher. And my job is to make sure that they're still enthusiastic about the success of the God of the Woods that helps those books work. And we're doing like new covers and such. So, that kind of stuff. And finally, we act a bit as a psychologist. Lots of times things, this is like very personal. This is very hard to do. It's a thing where people can like say negative stuff about you just openly, fine, like negative reviews, 1-star reviews, books that don't work, all sorts of things. And we will be your partner there because it's us too. Like my list is not just, oh, what do I think will sell? My list is like, what do I love? So I'm selling what I love, and an agent should be doing that too. And when people dislike that, that's a personal, it goes personally as well. So we get it, and we can help give context to how to get past that into the next level. Oh, wow, 10:30 already. But that's one of the only ones that have like that many of those lists. Don't worry. How do you get an agent? Okay, there's a lot to this. I'm going to be shorter here, but I think the easiest way to get an agent, or to not necessarily get it, but to like find the agent you might be wanting to approach, is to go to the books on your bookshelf that you love and look in the acknowledgments, find who the agents are there, and then submit to that person and say something like, hey, Seth Fishman, I love Ray Naylor's The Mountain and the Sea, and I think this book is, it's either can be comparative to that, or it's like, and I hope that you love this book, that even that can be a helpful thing. But you also know who I am, and then you have an intro in there, and then you have books like yours. So you could also go to books that hopefully you love them, but if you could also maybe not love them, but it's a type of thing that falls into your zone. So you can find agents that way also in the back of the book. And then finally, online, like it's much easier now. There's a lot of online stuff that you can do, query tracker and things like that. Even social media, Blue Sky, Twitter, where you'll have like pitch things that happen on those sites. And when they first happened, those first started up, they didn't really do too much, but now they actually do. You can find people that way, or we can find you that way. And then finally, there's conferences, there's MFAs, there's this right here. I am not saying you should go spend a lot of money on MFA, nor am I saying you should go spend a lot of money to go to conferences. I think it's kind of risky to do those kind of things. Like I would prefer if you were going to go to MFA, you would go to something where you're getting paid for, or it's covered, or maybe it's a low res, or low res means it's something that you do online and you come together for like a week. Those things tend to be cheaper. But why do you do those things? Why do you do MFAs? Why do you go to conferences? You do it to learn something. You do it to carve out time to be excited about something and to write. And sometimes that's what you need. Other times you could just be like, spouse, I need to go to a cabin in the woods and write. And that's perfectly okay. You don't need an MFA. But those are sometimes opportunities, these conferences, to meet agents. I will say, when I go to a conference, I'm not usually looking for a client. I'm looking to help writers. That sounds weird, but like right here, I'm not like, my list is pretty full. I've been doing this for 20 years. I'm not really taking on new clients. And yes, all of you can query me after this, and that's okay. But it's important for you to know where I'm at. And what I'm really trying to do is help give you the tools to, move yourself forward, because I just think that's really important. Okay. So I said cover letter, but I meant query letter. So apologies there. But I think I want to do a really quick rundown of what a query letter looks like. Side note, go straight to D here. If you, after this, at some point in time, you Google Seth Fishman query letter, you should find an hour-long video about this. So that's how long this could be. I'm sort of detailing those things. But the short of it is, query letter should be simple. The whole point of the query letter should be clean, should be to get me to the next page. It's not that I don't need to be excited, but the query letter is really like a checkbox thing, which occasionally has like a bright, shiny thing on it if something really does stand out. But those standout things are things you already have. It's not going to be the synopsis. I'll tell you why in a second. But basically, I think they should be 3 paragraphs, maybe 4. The first paragraph, I like to think about it as the small box. It's sort of what I said earlier when you look in the acknowledgments. It's like, why am I writing you? Dear Seth Fishman, I love that you are from Midland, Texas, and I wrote a book about oil, and I think maybe you would like it. And that's it. Like, a short little thing there. And what that does is, what's important about that very first paragraph is to try and get off the slush pile. For those of you who don't know, slush pile is like the unsolicited queries that come in. And the slush pile is big. It's hard to get through. We do take things on from there, but it's always better to find a way off of it or to be recommended. So this is some way to recommend yourself, to show that you've done your research. I've read thousands of query letters, and I will say a bad query letter almost always means a bad book. And if you think about it, it's sort of like, if an author didn't put the time to making a good query letter, then they probably didn't do the same for the book. So it is important to have it just be sort of crisp and researched. And I keep on saying, like, it's not that big of a deal. What I just mean is, it just should be not overly thought through. It just follow basic rules. Does that make sense? Like, you sometimes hear a story where it's like, in lieu of this, to look like a college essay application, in lieu of these essays or the application, here's a play I wrote. Let me in, Harvard. Like, that doesn't really work. What really works is to follow the rules of that application. So, so that first paragraph is short and simple. It's trying to show I've done the research. Make sure you know the gender of the person and the name and spell it right. Like, those things do matter, because that also shows that you've done research. Paragraph 2 is, what is this book about? That's your synopsis. That can be 1 and 2 paragraphs, but people really overthink this one. I know you can't write a synopsis. It's really hard to do. So just do your best. You don't have to lay out the whole plot of the book. If you have lots of characters, you don't have to list all the characters. I get that that's a little difficult. You should be able to try and get that done in 1 paragraph in a way that's like, this is what this book is. You might have in there comparative titles. Some people find that really important. The comparative title is when you sort of explain where this book lands. Like, I'm just grabbing 2 books. Like, this is like Ancillary Justice meets the 3-Body Problem. I think the biggest thing to be sure about there is that you don't go crazy with them. It's like, this is Harry Potter meets the Bible. Like, that's not going to be helpful. That's sort of like we know it's not that. So it's those comparative titles are meant to be informative. You can use TV shows or movies, like, you know, this is Top Gun meets you know, again, Ancillary Justice or whatever, like that is something that will give us an idea of what to focus on, and then an agent will help you come up with better ones if need be, further down the line. And finally, the last paragraph is, who am I? That's where your bio is. That is where you list if you have short stories published. You don't need, if you have more than 3 of them, you don't need to list all of them. You know, just list your first one. That's where you say if you went to an MFA, but that's also where you might say, like, I've worked in the coal mines for years, and this book is set there. Like, you know, things that are relevant that matter. You don't need to go on and on. It's mainly things that are relevant that matter. And that's the real short of the cover letter. There's lots of examples online, and you can find my query letter stuff. I think I have a thing here is, what to look for and avoid. Yeah.
We have a lot of people asking you to explain what is an FMA and why it helps with getting an agent.
Sure. So an MFA is it's like a master's degree in creative writing. It is, I want to be very clear. I am not recommending you go get MFA. I do not think you need to go to an MFA. An MFA is usually, you know, universities have them. I went to one. I went to one in England, so I went to the one in England mainly so I could have like a cultural experience if it also didn't work out. There are good ones in weird places. Iowa has a great one. Michigan has a great one. Columbia University, you know, is one that like people know about, but that one's like costs like $40K a year. Like, that's a lot of money. You don't need to. I have issues with it along the lines of the cost. And for a while, I think there was like a bit of a factory through the MFAs where a lot of people started sort of writing a similar style. So I even think there can be some negativity around it. And I want to be clear: if it says in your bio that you went to an MFA, okay, I'll be like, all right, you went to an MFA. If I don't recognize it, then that's still okay. I'll be like, all right, so you've put some time and effort into this process. And I think some of the advantages that do exist is, you know, you pay these places real money, and they're going to try and sometimes bring in agents to come and maybe meet you or whatnot. But that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to sign with that person. Sometimes you have teachers that are good. Some of them are bad. Some of them are famous, but they're bad teachers. Some of them are famous and good teachers. So there's a lot of pros and cons to them. Again, I cannot be clear enough. I am not recommending you go to an MFA. I think that a good writers group and commitment along those lines can be just as good. Or if you're like a sci-fi and fantasy writer, there's something like called Clarion, or it's Clarion West, and there's a couple different Clarions, and they cost money, but it's less. It's like 6 weeks. It's like a 6-week program. And I rep people that come out of there sometimes, but it's not a necessary thing. I think the biggest thing that comes my way from writers is this necessary? The answer is no. First and foremost, the book. And it's basically, what are the options that exist to help you write that book? And if you do have the discipline to be able to write it and then to be able to edit it, then that's great. And if you need help and you have like the disposable income, or you can find the MFAs that allow you to continue to work and not spend too much money, then maybe it's something worth doing. I found the thing most valuable about the MFA was actually like the bar afterwards, where I could talk to people about my book. And when you think about that, you're like, well, why did I go to the MFA? Why don't I just like get a group of people? And that's sort of what I mean by that, if that makes sense. And yeah. Okay. What to look for or avoid in an agent. I'm sure there's a lot of different things I could be adding on to this, but I mentioned some of these things, but they should be at a good agency. Again, you are going with an agent who is beyond just a person. They have their whole agency backing them. I mean this probably a little bit more for the younger agents. I want to be clear, like a big agent who's been around forever, who has your favorite authors, who has a full list, they might not be the best person for you. They might be too busy or aren't able to give you the time that you need. So maybe what you want is a younger agent who's really passionate. But in that case, it would be helpful if that agent is still at a good agency where they can go to their more experienced colleagues and get answers to their questions. The first book I ever sold was The Tiger's Wife. I showed you that book sold 1 million copies. Like, that was lucky for me in my career. But one of the reasons why it was able to happen was I was at a place where I could, support that author by asking the more experienced agents around me to be able to move forward. So it's important that you sort of, get your mind wrapped around what are some of the good agencies. I'm not going to list them here because I don't really, my job is to look at the editors, less the agencies, but I'm sure there's lots of, opportunities there and to find them online. And then of course, some people have their own agencies and that's fine too. Look at who they rep and then, get a sense of what their presence is and reputation is along those lines. You really want someone to love your work. Some of you are going to have some reasons why you're writing or write something that's that you have like a bio that is big of some sort of reason why someone might want to just take you on. Don't just jump at the first thing. Have someone who really loves your work and who's willing to sort of share that love and because that love is what helps sell a book. An editor hears that in my voice. And then also it has me stick around through the good times and the bad, and also one that has an idea of what to do with it. You can ask the questions like, who do you think we should submit to? Like, those are sort of basic questions. You should always be able to ask these questions. You can see that's number 5. When you come in, it's and if you're lucky enough that an agent's interested, then you're going to have a conversation with that agent, and you should look at the representation agreement that they have, which is the agreement between you and the agent. And you should ask questions over it. You feel free to have a lawyer look at it. Feel free to ask questions about what you're going to do with the book and how they like to work and what's this process like. And they should be able to answer these questions. At the same time, this number 4 is like probably my iffiest on this. I think you should connect with your person, but there's all sorts of different levels of connection. You don't hate your agent is really what I mean. And also don't be afraid of them. Be willing and able to ask them questions and to not just be like, the number of times people are like, I haven't heard from an agent in 3 months. And you're waiting to hear from them for something. That's not okay. But sometimes that agent just needs to be reached out to. So you should set up early, like what are the expectations? Some agents love to be texted. Others love, which I don't, especially work things, because I just forget things and I like it to be an email that I can look at. Some agents don't work after business hours. I'm insane and work in LA, and so I work sort of whenever. But I'll let people know timelines. So you want someone who you feel like you have a good rapport with. Again, this is your business, and you want to be able to have a back and forth. And then finally, someone who can handle your future work. That is very important, but is also in some ways the least relevant for most people. But a lot of times if someone has the idea you really want to write YA books and adult books, YA being a young adult, then you need to find an agent who does both of those things. You don't find 2 agents, and that's just not, it seems like it could work, but it's just not practically the way it goes. Beware of places, and there's going to find a lot of these, some that charge money, some people that are too busy, certainly ones that haven't read your book. If someone asks for an exclusive submission, and some places do that. What they're trying to do is they're trying to be like, oh, this is my time. My time's important. Fine. But send them the book. Don't tell them you're submitting it elsewhere. If you have interest elsewhere, then tell them. And if they say, I'm withdrawing, that's fine. That means they don't care about you. If they like your stuff, they wouldn't do that. If they're trying to do exclusive, they're already not working for you. They're already only working for themselves. So don't do that. Okay. Seth's opinions. These are things that are mine that other people might not share, other agents might not share. In your query letter, don't include a word count. I can't see any positive to it. If it's too long, then an agent might be like, oh, that's too long, and not read it. But if they're reading it and enjoying it, and then they look at their Kindle and they see how little they've done, and they're like, oh man, I gotta keep going. They're not gonna stop reading it. So just don't include a word count. Don't overthink it. Don't say things. This is fine to say. This is my opinion, but stand alone with serious potential. A lot of people say that stuff. Just believe in what you want to believe. If it's a series, if it's better as a series, and that's what you want to pitch it as. If something that you have is standalone, with series potential, even, you know, here's my book. You know, you don't have to describe it that way. I mentioned the comp titles already, comparative titles. Oops, sorry. Sometimes people send food and pictures of themselves. That was more when people would send physical things. That's less now, but you don't need to do that. Mainly do your research, know who you're submitting to, know what they're interested in, know what they care about, know who they are, where they are, what their name is, etc. Okay, gosh, 15 minutes. Let's go. You have an agent and a book. Now what? And so here's like a quick rundown of what you might do with your agent. Submission prep. So you're going to want to have, like I said, an understanding of what you want to do with your agent in communication wise. So you have the book. How do you do edits? How do you like to go back and forth on this? When we submit the book, you know, you want to know what that process is like. It's okay to ask what that's like, who they're submitting to see the list of it. A lot of agents don't share lists. Sometimes that's not nefarious. You should just ask for it. It's, you know, if they don't give it to you, then that's no good. So basically, your first thing you want to do is set up with your agent. How is this process going to work? How do you like to communicate? How do they like to communicate? And that's an important part of this. Most of the time, that's an agent taking the lead there. But it's important if you have needs, of course, to share them at that point. An edit. You have an agent, they're going to do an edit. So it's like sometimes it's like a different agent. Like I said, they do different things. I do more big picture stuff. But you want to have clear timelines. I try to tell my clients if I'm overloaded and I need like 6 weeks to get back to them. That sounds awful, I know, but usually you try, you know, like sometimes a longer book will do that, or you have certain things that I'm dealing with. So I just try and be really clear. I'm usually faster than that. And you want to get those timelines from people. It's okay to ask. It's okay to ask for what you want in an editorial letter. I love the book as it is. I need help on this section. I'm interested in know what you think about this. You know, it's okay to ask those questions. Finally, just like before, when is enough in terms of editing, is that sometimes though an agent will just sort of delay. And you need to ask that question to the agent, like, what's going on here? Do you not like this book? Because sometimes I get a book that needs edits and then the edit comes in and it's not good enough. And it never gets good enough. It turns in a direction I don't love or whatnot. And you don't want to be with that agent. You wouldn't want to be with me at that point. I don't want to submit something I don't love. And so what I do is I put the book through the ringer a few more times to see if it can get there. And sometimes it doesn't. And it's okay for you as an author to really stand up for yourself and to say, like, I want to go out with this. And if you don't like it, I'm going to go out to try and find another agent, or to try and not do edits you don't like, right? If an agent's like, this is the big edit that I want, you don't want to do that edit if you don't want it either. So make sure, and that should be an early conversation. Like, what are your thoughts editorially? So then when it's ready to go out, things can happen really at the speed of light. It's boom, or sometimes it can go slow. I think when you sell a book, I tell all my clients, if you're going to sell it at the biggest of levels, you probably will start hearing from editors very quickly and within 2 weeks have a good sense. But in general, most of the time, books take a minimum of 6 weeks to get a good understanding. And since COVID, and when I say understanding of like the lay of the land, editors of interest, since COVID, things are so slow. Editors are so overwhelmed. There's just fewer of them. It's much harder to nudge them the way that we used to and create sort of the flame of excitement. And that's part of our job. So things can go the speed of light, or they can go slow down a little bit. At the same process of the submission, and I'm going to go back to the submission in a second. If you have an agency with foreign rights, what you'll do is that I will I'll give the book to my foreign rights team. They'll read it and they'll start going out with it abroad. Usually that means the UK first, and maybe some other major territories, Germany, France, depending on what's going on in terms of timing. If it's an international book fair, it's time to write to that or whatnot. But most of the time, still things are led by the US. They're just prepped and ready to go abroad. And foreign rights is a whole separate thing. I'll just briefly say foreign rights deals are not the same as the US deals. They get paid, they're smaller, they get paid slower, and they come in chunks. Sometimes you get deals on submission of the book in the States. Sometimes you get it on when the cover comes in, when it's announced, when there's awards, when the book comes out. So these things trickle through, especially as smaller territories will come in, like a Latvian deal. That would be way down the line. At the same time as well, before submitting, I'm connecting with the film and TV agents. I already mentioned agencies and percentages. Some agencies have their own film and TV person, and sometimes we go and find them. We don't have one. We purposefully like to work with whatever agency we want. We don't want to force someone in our agency to take on something they don't like. But again, I mentioned those percentages. It's still 15%. Timing is really the thing. Like when I find someone who wants to work on a book, sometimes they say, let's wait till the book comes out. This is like kind of tricky. And then I trust them, so we'll wait. But sometimes it's good to sell a book before, at the, in film and TV, at the exact same time that I'm selling it in publishing. So we're trying to get those things set up before we go out with the book, after it's edited, but before that. At the same time, we have something called the Schmoozeration Acceleration, which is copyrighted by me, trademarked by me. That's when the book's ready. I'm repping you. I'm stoked about it. I'm going to be talking to editors about it for 3 to 6 months beforehand. At drinks, there's less drinks now since COVID, and I live in LA. But on Zooms, checking in with people, you start laying the groundwork for this submission, which is a large part of what we do. Then you clear the decks for calling and timing. So I'm going out with the book. I say to my author, hey, listen, we're going to go out with it. I don't know what's your schedule looking like in the near future, because if there is real interest, then you're going to want to speak to either in person or on the phone or Zoom with the editors and with me. So you're going to want to have some clear understanding of what your availability is. And then we start sending it off. And that's when you turn off your brain for 2 weeks, which is really hard to do. But that's what I try and tell my clients. Just turn off your brain. At this point, what I have done is I've compiled a list, depending on what category you're in. Literary fiction, for instance, I could send it to 20 editors, whereby in science fiction and fantasy, I could send it to 6 editors, 7. It's a whole different number of publishers that are out there. But I compile a list, I call each of those people, I send the book out, and then I wait too. If we're really lucky, something comes back really quickly, a phone call, oh my gosh, I love this, etc. But a lot of times, again, things take a while, and that's just a normal thing to happen. My job is when there's interest in one place, I sort of fan the interest elsewhere, and to try and set up a scenario where there's a lot of people. Selling the book is, and we don't have tons of time, but there's a lot of different ways that a book might sell. It could be, you just need one. So we could be lucky and you could have an auction. An auction is when there are more than one publisher who are interested in the book, and auctions vary in the way they're done. Sometimes I might say, hey, give me your best bid, and that's all we have, and we pick the one we like the most. And other times we have a really fun thing where we call up someone and we say, hey, you're the low bid, the high bid is this number. And these are good, not problems, good scenarios to be in. But just as often, in fact, probably far more often, is me getting one offer, 3 months in, having not so much leverage, but still trying to create the best deal that can come out of something. And that can, again, show up in all these different ways. Finally, ancillary rights. We're talking about aside from the translation and film and TV, but there's also merchandise rights and a few other ancillary rights that might exist. Some of those things take years to happen. If you're a project that, like a webcomic or something that fits right into that space, we might help you in that time period. If you've ever seen an author like Liz Moore did this sort of same thing with Brandon and this organization, that is in some ways an ancillary right, because that's a speaking right. They're doing a speaking event. So we can help, through that whole process, or help you get set up with someone who can help you with that. All right, so that's the burn through. We're not done now. Say we sold the book to an editor. Then what happens? So much happens. It takes 3 months for a contract to get negotiated and get your first paycheck. So we work on the contract. You go work with the editor on getting the book together. Then we do publicity around the book. We help with pre-order campaigns. Then the book comes out, and we are working on the future book, and we're working on this book, and we're helping you get set up with events, and we're helping you meet other editors and authors, and find blurbs, and just the whole 9 yards. And that might seem like a lot, and it is a lot, but that's what we're here for. We're here to help you, guide you through every set of the process. So I just gave you in 1 hour, like a vomit of all these things. You don't have to be worried about that stuff. Like, we go through it one step at a time. It really is just a step at a time thing. And what you guys probably should be focusing on the most is finishing your book, finding the agents. And then once you find an agent, then the stuff sort of moves correctly forward. So don't forget, publishing is a rejection business. It's crazy. Like, it's the kind of thing where, like, I remember when I was submitting to short story, the magazines or whatnot, if I got a handwritten note, be like, try again, on top of the form letter, I would like put that on my wall. If I sell a book for $1 million and 7 places bid on it, I still probably had 12 places pass on that book. Rejections happen all the time. It's a very weird business along those lines. So you need to create a level of tough skin. At the same time, you also need to be in that tricky spot right now of like, you need to believe in your work, but you also need to be willing to go put it in a drawer and try something new if it's not working after a period of time. That's where the drawer book. One thing that's really important, I just want to say to wrap this up, is like, none of us are like bad people, like in this space. Well, I don't know. I can't say that. But what I mean to say is we're all here for a reason. Like, we love books. Like, you're here because you love books. It's exciting. I've been through the ups and downs of it. I mean, I've had books published and I've had books go out of print. It's like hard to go in a bookstore and not find that book. I've had books win awards. I've had, people be excited about them. And you realize that sometimes it's just about writing a book. Like, that's what you want to do. And sometimes it's about the whole 9 yards of the process and making this your life. But books are, and sometimes it's just about telling one specific story. But whatever it is, on our end, the agents and the editors and the publicists, we all love books. So we're not trying to sabotage you, we're trying to do the best that we can with your books. And that's a positive thing. So what I would say to you is, despite anything about what anyone ever says about the state of the industry or the kind of book that you're writing, if you write a good book and you get it to the person who's looking for that book, like the right person, they'll fall in love with it and they'll do the best they can to sell it. I sell most of the books that come through on my desk. I'm just very discerning about the stuff that I care about. And I feel like that's just this thing that happens, is that people feel like there's this down on, oh, it's so hard. It is hard. It's supposed to be hard. But if you focus, that's why you should focus on the book. If you focus on getting the book to the right shape, then please, like, we can't wait to read it. We're so excited for you. And I, wish you the very best in this endeavor. So thanks for sitting with me while I zoom through all that. I could obviously go on and on. I'm sure you have tons of questions, so I'm going to stop sharing and we'll come back to the where we're at. There we are.
Hi, Seth. Thank you so much.
Hello.
So much amazing information was just imparted. So of course we have a bunch of awesome questions as well.
Yeah.
We did have quite a few people talk about the differences in the fiction and nonfiction submission process. And I know you mentioned in the beginning that you typically deal more with fiction, but Frederica is wondering if you can give them an idea of what the differences might be between fiction and nonfiction.
Yeah. And again, everyone, we only have 30 minutes, so I'm going to try and keep the shortest version of these answers in there. But this goes beyond fiction and nonfiction. Different types of books have different kind of queries. Novels, as most people are dealing with, be that middle grade, YA, or adult, in whatever genres, need to be finished. Memoirs too, actually, even though that's nonfiction, most of the time need to be finished. And then you go out and you find your agent. For nonfiction, there's a general recognition that if you're writing a book on the history of cod, then you need to spend time doing that research. And you sort of need to be paid to be able to take the time to do that. So then you can sell things on a proposal. And there are sample proposals out there. But in general, a proposal is the kind of thing that has an intro, like who you are. You're going to be writing these things down. This is dangerous. But it's like, what the book is about. Then there's an overview specifically about what the book is about, how long it is, how long it's going to take to write, who you are, like a longer bio, and your platform. And people ask a lot of questions about platform. I'm going to say for nonfiction, it matters more for fiction, it matters less. Of course, it's helpful. It's great. If you have a platform, that's great. You'll sell more copies, but it's not necessary. With fiction, with nonfiction, it is a little bit more important. Editors want platform, and I think that's annoying, but that's the way of it. And then you need, sort of a chapter outline and then sample chapters. So usually those run about 50 to 75 pages, give or take, for a nonfiction proposal. I would also say for a picture book, like, you need the full script. You don't need art if you are not an artist. If you have an artist attached, and you do already have an artist attached, then you don't need all the art. You just need character sketches and enough pages, one or two, that allow people to. Oh, my camera came unplugged. What happened?
Oh, yeah.
Can you hear me still?
I can hear you, yes.
Okay, hold on there. I don't know what just happened there. Oh, it's my camera down there. That made no sense. Well, I have no idea how that happened. Let me just change my view so I can look at you guys and you aren't looking at my nose. There we go. So yeah, but people ask this a lot about picture books. So if you have an artist, you just need enough to show that, like, this is what that art will look like on the page. But make sure it's good art. There's a lot of times that people, like, have a family member do it and they're, like, talented, but they're not great, and it actually will ruin the book. So make sure it's good art. Yeah.
You did mention that the agencies often have illustrators in case the author doesn't. So a lot of people are asking what that process looks like. Is it something where the agency chooses the illustrator for you, or is it kind of like a process where they work with the author and you all select one together?
Well, 99% of the time, like, the norm, if you're just writing picture books are those 32-page, where the wealthy are, again, kind of things. Most of the time, that's just text, and you find an agent that way, and you go out with the text, and then the publisher helps find. And there is some pro to that. The pros could be like, whoa, they're really stoked about this book. Let's spend a lot of money on it, on getting an illustrator who you might not be able to get. I think there is real value to submitting a book with an illustrator attached, but only if it's the right illustrator and that illustrator brings a value add to the book. And then you have a deal with it. So don't go with that illustrator. So don't go out hunting for it. If you submitted a picture book to me and it's just the script, and I have an illustrator who's right for it, then I'll bring it up. Other places have. You'll see when you look for agents of picture books, a lot of times they'll show their picture book illustrators, and that fit might be something. But those people are always busy. Everyone's busy, and it might not always make sense to connect that person. But there is some value to having an agent who sort of actively pairs those things.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So Matt from LA County Library is saying, what are common mistakes people make at the early stages in the process of finding an agent?
I think the big stuff, and I had mentioned some of these things, is really not doing the research. Like, you send it to someone, they're just silly things. Like, we're looking for every excuse to pass on it. And I don't mean that like, just because we have so many things. Also, remember, you're submitting it to humans, like, you're submitting it to assistants most of the time, not even the agent. And they could be having a bad day. That's unfair to you. So what I think is better is to just sort of make it clean and simple. And, like, if it's a funny book, maybe it could have a humorous tone, but you probably don't need to do that, because that could land wrong. Like, what if they don't like the joke? It's a bit of a risk. What I'm trying to say is, so I would say mitigate the risks. And you mitigate the risks by just following the rules. A lot of times, if you want to send it to someone, you can go on their website and you can find what their agency rules are, and you follow those rules. And that's really the shortest. The other stuff I had mentioned, some other things that were problems, but yeah, you can find more of that in the query letter video.
So you just mentioned, remember that you're submitting it to humans. And so we did have several questions on AI, and it has people wondering, are literary agents out there utilizing AI in that way, maybe even in particular for the slush pile, like give an AI summary to see if you even want to spend your time on it. Claire is saying, can you talk about how AI is affecting the publishing world? If it is, do you have any advice for new writers to help their work stand out?
Well, obviously this is an important issue. We're sort of in a weird industry in that we're pretty like, no, 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 no to AI, and for good reasons, right? We want to protect your creativity and our artists' creativity. In fact, one of the big lawsuits that are going on is being like, the name on it is one of my clients, Sarah Anderson. So, I'm well aware of the situation there. At the same time, AI as like a tool for business has a lot of applications that are going to be good. They're going to be things that the publishers are absolutely going to be doing. But what we do is we very actively work to try and make contracts such that your book's not going to be learned from AI unless you choose to have that be a case. HarperCollins just got offered money for a certain set of authors to have them be learned from, and authors got to choose whether they wanted to participate in that or not. I personally wouldn't have done that, but it's, again, it's the client, it's a client choice. But when it comes to like the submission process, we're more worried about you guys writing AI than us. Like we don't use the, I mean, like, do you know how much work it is to read a book? Yes, it's a lot, but a synopsis is a synopsis. Like I would never trust AI ever to say, is this book good? If they just give me a summary, you guys have already given a summary. So I see absolutely no value to that. I could maybe see the value of them organizing them by date of arrival. So that's an example of like something that would be helpful as opposed to hurtful.
Yeah.
Right. What things has happened before? Certain magazines like had to shut down their submission process because people are submitting too many of the same thing. A lot of y'all are writing query letters. They're exactly the same. So beware of that. I would, I don't think it's the worst thing to have it give you a basis that then you make your own, but we see all that. We see through it. Maybe we don't see through it. I don't know, but I'm not worried about it. I think they're going to get to a point where they'll be able to write as good as humans. But I think that the humanity around existence, like proof of reality, like from in-store events to interactions with fans on a certain level, we're still a little bit away from that. And we are all working very hard to try and avoid this going away. Your creativity and whatnot going away. So we're on it. We're doing the best we can, and it is a tricky time.
Speaking of query letters, Nancy very vividly has asked, I would rather chew glass while getting a colonoscopy than write query letters. Is there really no other way?
That doctor's going to have some fun. They just stay there and then they'll see the glass come through. Is there another way? No. I mean, if you and I were buds and you said, hey, I have a book, you don't need to send me a query letter. But I would probably I want you to know, anytime a bud does that, I'm like really nervous because I reject most things, and it's never great for a friendship when you like pass on their like personal work. So there's no way about it. But I have to say, Nancy's the name, right? Like, that's why I say don't overthink it. Don't overstress it. Just write the basic. Just do the basics. There's like tons and tons and tons of tools to be able to do it. What's way more important is the book. So just make a clean query letter. It's probably worth your while to, again, like you go to these things so you can find the agents and know who they are and speak to them about it. And I'm not speak to them, know what they're speaking about. So then in your first line, you can say, hey, I saw you on this thing. Like that stuff means that you're paying attention. Like that stuff matters. But in general, it's just in and out, get to the next page.
Yeah. Okay. NL is saying, are there fees if a book does not sell? I would definitely benefit. No. Okay. That was one of those beware. So like anybody who's trying to charge you, right?
No, in fact, I mean, we work on spec. So I spend lots and lots and lots of time on things making no money. And a lot of times, like, let's give you some context. Let's talk about this. People want to know this. Let's say you have a good advance of $100,000. You're pretty happy with that, right? You're going to get paid out in fourths, maybe thirds if you're lucky, but probably fourths. And in your first year, you'll get only 1 to 2 of those payments. So maybe you'll get $50,000. You pay us 15% of that. We split it up, so we don't get a huge, we don't get a huge amount. And you pay us 15% of that, and then you have taxes. So, like, I'm very wary when an author tries to leave their day job, and they are too, and that stinks. That's awful. And again, all of our job is to try and get you sort of the right advance to have you be able to write another book, be published. And sometimes that's not the biggest advance. Sometimes you want to be at the right place, right? So we work on those things with you, but yeah, no fees, no fees to anyone. No.
Is there an average amount for deals? Or is it just really subjective?
I mean, I think that's a fair question, but the answer is no. And also there is some ranges, like picture books get paid a lot less. And then most of the other things there, it's about what you got. It's about how good the project is, coupled with any the other things that might exist there, like what platform you might have that, like I said, just think about like a famous person who has no experience writing and then writes a book. That book probably will sell to someone, right? But if the book is really good, it will sell for a lot to someone. Does that make sense? Yeah. So there's no real game to play there. I wish there was.
Yeah. You, when you outlined the process of what an agent can do for you, part of that was contracts. And Sue is saying, do you suggest that your clients also have their own contract lawyer to review the paperwork, or is that something that the agency exclusively takes care of?
That's a great question. I would say no. I mean, I don't certainly not recommend, because that costs a lot of money, and you're paying for that through us. Sometimes people have them. Most of the time, those people are like larger organizations or people who already have an entertainment lawyer for some other reason or whatnot. And I will say, though, the problem is when you have a different contract person, usually that person is outside of the publishing thing, and they sort of make a mess of the contract because they don't know the context of what we're doing, whereby we work really hard to have people who, they do books. So I don't think so. I don't think you need to have that. No. When it comes to film and TV, you might end up needing to figure that out, but that's something you can work with your agent on.
Mm-hmm. Kelly is wondering, can you please speak more about publicity of a book once it sells? Does an author typically have a chance to do a book tour if they want? What determines how you publicize the book? Is that more the publishers and the publicist side, or do the agents work on that as well?
I mean, that's a pretty big question. It's a great question. It's a pretty big question. The short of it is, it's the publisher's responsibility, but it's an agent and author's responsibility to sort of, like, a lot of times, even for big books, an author will do most of the work. Sometimes it's a bad publicity team, and sometimes it's just something that they're working really hard and it's just not hitting. And sometimes the value of the author's platform just by far overwhelms. Like, I'll show you, this book is a great book, but it's based on a German YouTube channel called Kurzgesagt, which also I can't pronounce very well. The pre-orders on this, because of the video that they produced, which cost a lot of money, but it was a video through their channel, was tremendous. And it sort of dwarfs the things that the publisher can do in some ways. But other things are like, every step of the way is a publisher's push. My job is to work with you to interpret what the publisher's saying. Like, oh, when they're bragging about them posting on their Instagram account, that's nothing. That's dumb. Like, that's their vertical. It's like, not to say it's dumb to publish them, but it's just like that's something in hand. There's not a get there, right? And also helping you find the things. So I help interrogate. A good agent will help interrogate you to figure out where we can plumb your connections to go after things. But the best scenario is that I am just sitting on the sideline, high-fiving and not having to do that, right? That means the publisher's doing it all and getting it done. It's just really hard. It's really hard nowadays to publish books. And there's very few. It used to be, here's the negative, right? It used to be like a Times review would matter. Like print, like a lot of these things matter. Nowadays, even like a book club, which I would say really, really matters, still doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be on the bestseller list. Like Reese Witherspoon could pick something. It's not necessarily on the bestseller list. That's kind of crazy. And like TikTok, which really could sell things, like you can't really make that happen. That's like natural goodness of it. Publishers are trying. They just don't, it's hard to make happen. So we try and create the scenarios to exploit in the positive. exploit of yours, of whatever we can use to give tools to the publisher and also do things on your own. And I will go not around a publisher, but like next to a publisher and do things myself, pitch things myself if need be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We have some people asking the difference between foreign and domestic, and Alice saying, what is considered foreign and domestic within the publishing industry? Example, as a Canadian, should I only look for Canadian agents?
That's a great question for you Canadians out there. I represent, I'm sure you recognize like lots of Canadians in that little rundown.
Kate Beaton.
In general, a North American deal is like the standard deal that includes, well, we know what North America is, but basically we're talking about Canada, Mexico, and the United States. There are separate Canadian publishers and you can make separate Canadian deals, but you kind of need to be of a size to be able to separate those things out. And what you first want to do is even if you make a deal directly with a Canadian publisher, you probably are making a North American deal, and that's okay. Does that make some sense? The UK is kind of hilarious and tricky in that they include Australia and New Zealand and India and South Africa and various Caribbean islands. And so there's some things to be done or trickiness there, but yeah, that's a short answer to that. It's a little sticky, but it's all things that you're asking. The real question that you're asking that matters here is, should I find a Canadian agent first? I would say if you're in the UK, you should find a UK agent. If you're in Canada, you should be submitting to both Canadian and US agents.
Okay.
But when you submit to them, if it's a Canadian-based thing that you're doing, then like get a sense from that US agent that they know a little bit of the Canadian market.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. It's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Alessandra says, what are some things in a query letter that have made you personally really excited to learn about someone's work?
Well, I'll keep this kind of short, but the good news about that is that that's going to be different for every agent, and that's why you do your research. So it's like, it's funny. Sometimes I like really like to hear something like, I don't know, if you send me something about zombies, I just personally don't like it, zombies. And you might not know that. Why would you know that? So that's going to be a swing in the dark, right? But so that might be a negative, but maybe I'm really looking for something that is about a Western vampire. You don't know what anyone's, and that's the thing, these things change. So sometimes this stuff gets switched around. Like a lot of times, I represent the three-body problem. So all sorts of writers, Chinese writers in translation were sending me stuff. And when they were similar, it was like, well, actually, I'm not looking for the same thing. I'm looking for something different. So, it doesn't mean I don't want another Chinese writer in translation. So I want to see a different story. So it can be a little bit tricky. And I think you, again, still write the best thing that you can and see at any agency who seemed like the best fit, and you just give it a try.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. Thank you. Joe is saying, is it rude to ask an agent for a referral if he or she does not deal with the author's genre? I'm supposing that maybe you just won't get a reply, right?
I'm not. I don't think it's rude. You probably just won't get a reply if it's base. If we responded and said, "Oh, this is closed. It's not really right for me," it's okay to ask that question. You still might not get a reply. I would also say it's also, you made me think of something else that I'll say is, if you get further down the track, say someone wants to offer you representation, then you should, it's okay to ask to speak to some of the authors. It's that not all, I don't know. I'm sort of iffy on that because I can't bother my clients all the time having them speak to new people, but sometimes if you really need it, you can probably ask for that. There's something I totally forgot that's really important here. If someone offers you representation, don't just take it. Say, thank you, awesome, set up a time, have a conversation with them, ask for 2 weeks. It's totally fine. If they say no, then again, they're not working for you. I know it's hard to do this. A lot of you guys are going to ignore me, but you really should wait those 2 weeks and then tell all the other people you submitted to that you have an offer of representation, because then they're going to read that book quickly and then you'll have people to choose from and you can choose your favorite. The thing that I hate the most is when I'm told that someone has an offer of representation. I stop everything. I read it overnight. I'm excited about it. I like try to get back in touch with that person. That person's like, oh, I signed with someone with that first person. Then why'd you even tell me, right? We put our time and effort on spec to do these things. So, and it's also in your favor. So you want to be able to get as much, even if you end up with the first person, you want to be able to test the waters. And if that first person leaves, then you tested the waters by realizing that person's not there for you. They're only there for themselves.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Good advice. Thank you. Is it a good idea or a bad idea to publish snippets of a story on something like a blog or a Substack?
Yeah, I think it's fine. A lot of people ask the question about self-publishing. Self-publishing is kind of cool in that you could self-publish a book and it could not do well, and people will be like, oh, well, it's because it's self-published, no problem. But if it does well, it's a bonus in your favor. And I rep a lot of people who started from the self-published world. In fact, I think it's fine for you to be a hybrid author where you don't go all the way to traditional publishing and you do both. You work in audio first. Like I don't mind it either which way. It's okay to do those things. Sometimes a publisher might ask you to take some things down at some point, but no, I don't think that's a problem. No.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Sharon is saying many children's publishing companies do not accept unsolicited manuscripts unless you've been previously published or have an agent. And many agents do not accept you as a client unless you've been published. What are your suggestions as to how to navigate this catch-22? How does one emerge from the slush pile?
I hate to do this, but I think the second part of that statement is basically untrue. Agencies, like doesn't really make any sense. Like we don't take on people who have been published. Not really. So we take on people who don't and help them. So I don't think it's that much of the catch-22 in reality. Though I'm very sure that you saw that somewhere, but that's not really the norm. So yeah, mm-hmm. There are a lot of catch-22s out there though. But yeah,
is that one of the times when perhaps you're looking at like a bad agency versus a good one?
Yeah, well, also if they're not going to take on someone, I mean, there's probably some places who only want to go like do little work. Like there's something called a speakers bureau, which will represent authors to set up speaking events. They really only work with big people. So they do no work to find big people. They just wait for people to get big and then big enough to come to them. Like, so there's probably versions of that in the agency mode. But in general, that doesn't really make any sense for me. If someone comes with a book deal already published, then like sometimes that could be great, but a lot of times that's more trouble. That's trouble. It's hard. We have to like fix things. I'd like to start with something new.
Mm-hmm. And that's an important distinction is a literary agency, which is you're a literary agent versus a speaking agent, which is after the fact, after your book is published.
Yeah. Sorry for confusing. Thank you for clarifying.
That's okay. That might have been, people might accidentally reach out to a speaking agent first, not understanding that they need to start with a literary agent.
Right.
Christina is saying, should we be working on building our social footprint? This question came up a lot. You addressed it a bit. There were also some people who said that agents wouldn't talk to them because their social media following wasn't big enough. So Christina's wondering, should that be
great? I'm glad you brought this up. This is brought up a lot. Again, with nonfiction, it matters a little bit. It matters, I would say, a lot more. But the agents that don't talk to you because of social media, if they explicitly said that, it's pretty crazy, and you don't want to go with those people anyways. What's kind of cool about publishing still is that you can be a no-name writing a good book, and you find an agent, and then that agent will go and make you a name and will build you. Like the God of the Woods that's doing so well right now that I showed you from Liz Moore, like this is her 5th book. We've been working forever. She was my 3rd client. You grow these people. Not everything has to be a success out of the gate. Don't go try and build up your socials. I think it's okay to be on socials to look around and get familiar with the landscape. And if you're natural at it and you like it, but it takes a lot of time, sometimes a lot of money if you are really trying to make them snazzy. If it's your natural thing, if it's your fit, if that's what you want to do, fine. But, and yes, of course there's a value add if you have a lot of people following you, but we're talking about like a lot of people. So most of the time, it's not going to be worth it unless it's something you've been doing naturally already. And I basically do not say to go do it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So Eric is wondering about webcomics. How do your clients monetize webcomics? Or do you find folks who have low revenue generating webcomics first and you convert their comics to book properties?
Yeah, well, so first of all, there's two types of webcomics nowadays. One is like something that the websites like Webtoons or Tapas might publish, which are literally like what you think like a comic on the web. And then there's also things like on Instagram. These are other more traditional webcomics. They used to be just a website like XKCD or Harka Vagrant, like actual websites. And then now it's more disseminated through things like Instagram. And those are small little comics that are like Strange Planet, like Garfield, like the funnies, and where you find those people. I don't go looking for like what I do when I'm looking is I tend to go to Instagram and type in webcomic and follow 20 accounts. And then over the next month, as I see them pop up, if they're not interesting to me, I'll just unfollow them. And then if I like them, then they stay on, then I'll keep with them. It is helpful for them to have a larger platform in terms of sales there. That's another example of something that is true with collections. But if they wrote and that's what they're usually trying to sell, like the collection of their comic, right? But when it comes to a narrative, it doesn't have to be that way. If they wanted to write something like a middle grade graphic novel or something. So they monetize. Some of them make plenty of money with their own merchandise, either direct to consumer or through places like Threadless or whatnot. But we come in and we try and do the print deals. We try and do foreign deals. We try and help with merch and film and TV and sort of the whole 9 yards, and also help them do other things. Like sometimes they're doing a collection and then a kid's book and then a memoir and we help them navigate that process. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. James is saying rejections come quickly, sometimes within an hour of submission. What do you do when you get a message that indicates the work is being considered? So I think you kind of answered that already with, not considered. You said accepted. Once an agent accepts you, give yourself some time.
Well, if someone asks for like a full, you can tell other agents. What's funny is that I want a full no matter what, because I would
full
get annoyed.
The
full manuscript. Sorry, yeah. Because if I read 3 chapters and I was enjoying it, I would be like, "Where is the rest of it?" So I don't mind. I think it was a different time when it was printing, and that's sort of a leftover from that, where people were trying to save money. If someone rejects you within an hour, that probably means that they're not open to queries at the moment, or they don't think yours is the right book. They didn't read your thing, so therefore you should be even less discouraged. That means try someone else at the agency, or they weren't the right fit, and you don't want to be with them anyways. Or you need to look at your query letter, but they didn't read your book and pass on it. But yeah, in terms of when you should go look or nudge other people, that's when there is an actual response asking for more stuff, if that makes sense.
Okay, that does make sense. We are nearing the end of our extra special session together. So I'm going to ask you the same question that I usually close with for authors that I'm interviewing about things that they've written, which is, I'm curious to know, do you have time to read for yourself outside of people submitting things to you? And what are you currently reading that you suggest everybody run to the library and check out immediately?
Great questions. I think it's really important to read both for brain research of as a business research, and also for funsies. I read different things based on where I'm at or what I need. If I need a deep thought literary thing versus if I want something that I'm just be like a page turner. And I also listen to a lot of audiobooks. This is great to share this right here, because I did all those lists of books, but here are some forthcoming books that y'all can look at. Like Kate Beaton's got her first picture book in a long time called Shark Girl, which is a hilarious, irreverent take on, finding the shark in the water, like a little sort of Little Mermaid-ish. She has the shark biting someone, which I think the publisher was like, I don't know about, but then they kept with it. This is Angie Kills a King, which is an awesome, fast-paced fantasy book by Elvin Likem, who's a bookstagrammer who's incredible. And he didn't just get this book because he has followers. This is really good, and it's got like this incredible cover. And Tor is publishing that one in May. And this is the Phoenix Pencil Company by Allison King. This is literary. It's cross-generational, about a family who sort of have, the women in the family have this sort of magical ability with a pencil to sort of keep what had been written on them live and out there. And it goes from China before World War II through to the present day. And it's just so very wonderful. If you like Tomorrow and whatnot, this is a great one. So also pre-ordering that one comes out on 7/25. So there's those thrown at you. Yeah. And you should go out and listen to right now. You should go Dungeon Crawler Carl. That's a really fun one that's out. Go listen to the audio. It's like one of the best audio books that are out there. Okay, it's crazy.
I listen to audiobooks all the time because of all my drive time. So I love a good audiobook recommendation. Thank you.
For sure.
Okay. Thank you so much, Seth. Thank you so much for spending your time today and imparting all of the wisdom that you have. It's been an incredible time. So thank you. I can't thank you enough.
Thank you guys so much. And I know there's all these other questions. There are answers online. The big thing to remember again is you got this. Like, exercise, write a lot. When I say exercise, you're writing, and just keep trying. And thanks for everything, Brandon. Thanks for having us. And thanks to the Library Speakers Consortium and all you libraries out there for doing the good hard work of keeping the cultural institution alive. So thank you all.
I want to echo that. Without your support, none of this would be possible. So we thank you to the viewers as well for choosing to spend your time with us. Below the live stream video in the resources area, you can find a link to Seth's website as well as a link to the Gernert Company. We look forward to everyone joining us next week on February 4th when we chat with Smithsonian curator Sabrina Schultz about how we create pandemics from our bodies to our beliefs. Be sure to register for this and lots of other great events on your library's event page. I'm Brandon Adler. Thank you for joining us.
Bye, y'all.